new Foreign Trade Policy 2023 announced today by Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal aims to take India's goods and service exports to $2 trillion by 2030. But I suppose the centerpiece of the entire foreign trade policy and of India's push in the recent past, even on the G20 forums, has been to institutionalize and expand trade in rupee. Simply put, that when our exporters send their goods, they can be paid in rupees instead of dollars, and the same for our importers. Now, there's already some kind of a template in place which has come through the rupee-ruble agreement, and this was born out of the Ukraine-Russia war. When, Russia was in the doghouse with the United States, they were removed from the SWIFT system, and India decided to pursue the rupee-ruble trade with Russia. That has worked well. Can we expand it is the question. 18 countries have signed up to at least consider it, so that's a big move. But this is a bigger story than just rupee trying to India just trying to institutionalize the rupee and sort of end the dependency or reduce the dependency on the dollar. That's happening across the world as well, with China and Brazil deciding to dump the dollar to trade in their own currencies. Can we move forward on this? To chat on this, I'm joined today by Jayant Dasgupta, former ambassador and representative of India at the WTO. Sharad Kumar Saraf, president of FIEO, is joining us today. That's the Import and Export Organization Federation. And Ajay Dua, also with us on the show. Thank you to all of you for joining us and welcome. Let me start with you, Mr. Dua, by getting your sort of take on whether this will move and this will really yield those dividends. Also, is it new? Has India in the past as well tried to make the rupee center stage of trade?
Thank you, Tamanna, for having me on your show. Very interesting topic. And it has arisen, certainly, we've been talking about it for almost the last 1 year, ever since India's global recovery post-pandemic has been better than the Western countries, ever since our kind of forex reserves have remained, only fairly untouched, and more so, I would say, because the rupee vis-a-vis the dollar depreciated less than many other currencies in the last 1 year to 14 months, ever since the Ukraine war started, and there has been appreciation in the dollar because of the higher interest rates being imposed by the Fed in the US. And today, officially, it's a part of the trade policy announced by the government. And in the meanwhile, in the last few weeks, as you mentioned, 18 countries have agreed to look at the Indian proposal vis-a-vis trade with them. Having said that, I would say it's a very good idea if we can succeed in doing it. We have an example which was in position for almost 20 odd years. That was the rupee-ruble trade between India and Russia, I would say India and the Soviet Union, started in early 70s, which kept on as long as the Soviet Union was in position till the mid-90s. There it worked well, and it's again working fairly all right ever since we started importing much more oil from Russia than we had been doing all these years. The question is, 2 or 3 things come to my mind on how we would need to bat if we want to be going forward. One, we would need to make sure that our GDP continues to grow more than any of those countries which are exactly the whole world trades in dollars as of now, very few in any other currency. But the major players, trading partners of the US or the trading partners in Europe who continue to deal in dollars. So it means that growing by 7 to 8% over the next 10 years in GDP term. Is that possible? As of now, today's private sector investment, though recovering, is not yet come up to the mark of reaching the 7 to 8% rate of growth, and we are talking of 5 to 6% even now for the next year. Second is we need to be worried about our CAD, current account deficit, which despite the increases in export, 21, 22, 22, 23, also might touch about $700 million, $1 billion as announced by the trade minister yesterday. But the question is, it is still 2% of the GDP,
Right.
which is pretty high, the trade deficit. And here I'm taking into account the services exports, also not merely the merchandise. So that we'll need to, if you want to get into rupee trade or have the rupee acceptable in the global currency, we'll have to do much more. And finally, I would say that our trading partners have to be ready to trade in our currency. Russia, given the conditions it is in,
Right.
is probably agreeable. But Russians also seem to be indicating that they would prefer to do it in the dirhams of UAE. UAE now wants to increase its trade with India after we've done the FTA with it. But the question is, it is just about trilateral so far, whether all our trading partners, particularly Europe and the US, there would be some resistance, and the countries with which we have our free trade agreements, Japan, Korea, the SAFTA countries, in position, and we are talking to fairly close. We've signed the early harvest agreement with Australia, a fuller one this year, whether they would be willing to switch. Similarly, Canada, we are talking to them. UK, European Union, I'm not sure they'll all be willing to come on.
So I want to get the sort of practitioner point of view. That's why we have Mr. Saraf also on the show today. Mr. Saraf, it sounds like a great idea. It will cut down on our current account deficit. We, will be able to give options to nations who are starved of dollars right now. And that's become a reality, right, with the Fed tightening. The availability of dollars is less, dollar prices have gone up, etc. Do you think there are enough takers for rupee as the currency for trade?
Yes, ma'am. One thing is certain, that this is a step in the right direction. Secondly, as far as countries in Africa, Asia are concerned, they certainly will welcome, because they all view Indian economy as a very strong and stable economy. Now, the fact that 18 countries have now agreed to trade in rupee, I think everyone is waiting for the dust to settle, the procedures to be laid down, and then more and more countries will join in. I agree with Mr. Dua that when we sign a free trade agreement, we should also try to put a condition that sooner or later the trade between the two countries will be done in the local currency. Because at the moment we are seeing a lot of inherent weakness in the US dollar, and more countries are losing faith in the dollar itself. So therefore, this is the right time. And I think we took the first step. And after we announced rupee trade, China is now going overboard and trying to get Russia to do the China ruble, yuan ruble trade. Now they are going to Brazil, trying to woo them to do yuan Brazilian currency trade. So, they are also trying to copy what we have done. So gradually, as things pan out, I think in due course of time, dollar will lose its luster.
No, but Mr. Saraf, my specific question, you're absolutely right. It's a step in the right direction. Everyone wants to do it. But my question to you is that are our trading partners, our largest trading partners, willing? And where we get the high value trades from, your European Union, your, US, Canada.
UAE.
Middle East. Middle East, are we going to set up a rupee dirham kind of a situation? Yes. Will that be happening?
We, in my own company, we have a lot of business in UAE, and we do talk about it off and on with our partners. And almost everybody agrees that yes, it can be done. There is no problem.
But why is it not happening so far? I'm trying to understand why has it not happened so far?
Yes, because the mechanism has to be established. RBI is working on it. As soon as the procedural aspects are cleared, it will happen. Already with Sri Lanka, it is happening in some way. We are also doing business with Sri Lanka in the local in the rupee trade. So it does take time. It is something new, and as it percolates down, more and more countries are going to come on board.
Okay.
So I don't think there is any problem.
So there should be no issue. Mr. Dasgupta, the issue will be from the US. I mean, they're not going to let the dollar hegemony slide so easily. Now, I want to get the diplomatic view as well. You know, I don't know how the United States is going to let go of the dollar hegemony. Will it really happen? And what do you see are the roadblocks going ahead? Because it sounds great on paper. This is something that, you know, we're making the most of an opportunity that has arisen in a time of possible global recessioning, tightening of the Fed, the Ukraine-Russia war. All of this has led to an opportunity. Now, the question is, will we see pushback from the United States?
I think there are a few factors which we need to bear in mind. One of them is that of all the global invoices for trade, the dollar-denominated ones are 4.7 times more than the US imports. So it means that it is, as the IMF's Geeta Gopinath has mentioned, the dominant currency paradigm. Now, if we have to get away from it, there are a few roadblocks. I will come to them in a moment. The other point is that 88% of the trade, international trade, is in dollar-denominated currency, dollars. The scope for getting into this through Indian rupee trade is only about 4%, which is, of course, packed with yuan and a few other currencies, non-dollar currencies. Now, one of the things which, and I agree with Mr. Dua, the points that we have to bear in mind. One of the things which, of course, will come to the fore is whether we have a stable currency. If our currency is also constantly, sliding back, then there would be a certain degree of reluctance, which was mentioned in the context of Russia, that they want to trade with India in UAE dirhams, not in rupees. So that will have to be borne in mind. The other factor which will be there will be how do we really, the mechanism has already been laid out in the 11th July 2022 circular of the RBI, that the transactions would take place through a special Vostro account. Now, the problem is that if, for instance, we buy a lot more and the other country deposits and it gets converted into rupees, there could be a pressure on the Indian monetary policy front, because this Indian rupees will be in the hands of, so to say, people from other countries, and they may buy assets, and that could have a kind of an impact on our monetary policy. So we have to factor these things into our equation. And finally, the issue is that the US will, of course, not very willingly give up its dominant position or pole position. But the way things are moving, if the BRICS countries and Russia, Brazil, China, Brazil agreement is of a piece with that, China, Russia, India, Russia has been in operation since December 2022. And it now remains to be seen whether India can have an agreement with the Brazilians and the South Africans to seal this whole BRICS in a non-dollar denominated trade. So if that can be done, then I think we can take it from there. It will take time. It will, of course, not be easy. But India's currency and GDP growth, if they hold firm, and our exports and imports both continue to increase at a fast clip, then I think it would definitely be possible.
Point over there about what is the stability quotient of the dollar? Mr. Ajay Dua, let me come to you on that. Of the rupee, I'm sorry, what Jayant Dasgupta said, what is the stability quotient of the rupee? If the rupee wants to be the alternative to the dollar as far as trade from India is concerned, it has to be a stable currency, not open to fluctuations depending on what's happening with the dollar or in the world. Do you think that can be achieved, and are we there at this point?
Quite, Tamanna. I would say at this point of time, all that has happened is because of the Fed increases in the interest rates, there has been outflow of capital, foreign capital, from almost all the emerging countries, including India. We've seen, for instance, there's some figures floating around that last year, in the month of December itself, about $4 billion, but there was a net outflow from the country. The annual figures will probably come soon. The question is, because of the dominance of the dollar in international trade, as Jayant mentioned, 88% of the trade is still dollar denominated. The acceptance of the dollar, and see, gold standard might have gone. At one time, everything, as you know, was linked to the gold price. Who's holding Fort Knox was the biggest citadel of the world's gold, almost most of it being held there. So the American dollar was linked to it, and we saw a degree of stability. Right now, that stability is not available to the dollar for sure, nor is it available to anyone else, including us. But the fact is, it is now linked to the capital flows in and out, money coming out of countries. As long as it continues to be dollar dominating that, the rupee would remain under pressure. We have lost in valuation, as we all know, with the rupee having crossed to 83 rupees to a dollar last week itself. But there are other currencies, including the Japanese yen, which lost much more. So I am saying, yes, volatility is a very important issue. So far, we've been able to somehow or the other make it within an acceptable band of plus minus 5% in the course of last 6 months, ever since the sanctions, etc., got into position seriously. But I am not sure if our import dependence continues to remain high. If we continue to import, for instance, besides crude oil, our coal imports have been adding hugely to our import bill. Gold import was also affecting, as was the diamond import. We are adding very little value to all these items and then exporting. So we would have to now make sure that if we want to make it stable, we would need to make sure that our current account deficit, which is today sizable, that shrinks, and that will add stability to the Indian rupee.
Mr. Saraf, what would be the advantage to you in terms of business, in terms of efficiency, if we do move to more and more rupee traded business and exchanges? How will it help you?
The advantage would be that we would be not exposed to the foreign currency volatility. Today, when we are doing trade in dollar, we don't know how much money we will get when we get paid. So when we are doing in rupees, that volatility factor would not be there. The things would be more convenient. And also I expect that costs, the bank charges, will also go down, because there are 2 times the currency changes hands. Supposing if I'm exporting to Europe and then in dollars, then it changes from dollars to euro, and then rupee to dollar to rupee. So, this double cost would also be gone. So overall, there will be a great advantage. There will also be an advantage of speed. with which we can get the payments done, because of the Vostro account, the money is already there, and the movement of funds will be much faster. So I think overall there will be great advantage, and the system will become far more efficient if we go for a rupee trade.
Absolutely. Let's hope there is movement in that direction. At least we have made it very clear that we want to push for it, and the opportunity is also ripe. It will definitely make a huge difference and perhaps at least reduce, if not end, the hegemony of the dollar as a global currency. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the show this evening. We're going to take a very short break, but a lot more coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.